Ted, let's go back to the earliest memories you remember of life on the farm.
Let me start off by saying I'm 83 years of age. And this property has a great meaning to me.
Okay, help us out now. This property meaning where?
Right here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because my father, during the Great Depression of 1933, purchased an adjoining farm across the river. And that's where your Howard County executive, Alan Kilterman, presently lives with his mother.
So when you were young, real young, did your father or your grandfather, were they farming?
Oh, yes. Yes, my grandfather had 14 children, 7 boys and 7 girls, of which my father was one.
Was your
And they were all
farming?
Pardon me?
Was your grandfather farming?
Oh, yes.
Tell me what...
Well, when he wasn't raising children, he had to get a lot of kids to do all this farm work.
Tell me what his farm life was like.
With my father?
No,
Well, he was just a general farmer, and my father was a general farmer. He had everything. He had hogs, milk cows, a few milk cows for making products, butter. Had a small orchard. Had a nice house.
How big was the farm?
143 acres. And he would sell his apples to the Renahan apple butter factory at Sykesville.
What?
My uncle
Yeah.
used to own the country store right here at West Friendship. That was the West Friendship Post Office. His name was Albert Ridgley, and had the little grocery store in the West Friendship Post Office there.
Well, Ted, let me focus on your grandfather for a second, okay?
I can't remember that much about Granddaddy. He smoked his cigar, but...
So you were alive when he was alive?
Yes.
Okay, and so then at some point he passed away. What was he doing with his life that you remember?
Just farming.
Okay,
Just
what kind? Be specific for me.
General farm. Nothing big time. Just, I guess, like my father with hogs and sheep and a few cows, horses, of course, chickens, turkeys, everything that you would imagine on an old time farm.
Do you know what size his farm was?
No, I don't.
Okay. So your dad grew up there with how many brothers and sisters?
He had 13 brothers and sisters. So my grandfather wasn't too busy farming. He was...
But he didn't have any problem getting farm hands, did he?
No. That was the purpose. And my grandmother was descendant directly from Germany. And he was an Englishman, my grandfather.
How did they meet, you know?
I never had the opportunity to ask him.
That's all right. Do you remember what age you were when your grandfather passed away?
Gee, I was probably only 5 or 6 years old.
Okay. And your dad now had how many kids?
3.
Okay, so you're one of...
I had an older brother that's 5 years older, and I have a younger brother that's 10 years younger.
Big difference.
Yes.
So when your father, let's go specific. Your dad's name is?
Charles Wilbur Ridgley.
When Charles, what do people call him?
Charles.
Okay. So when Charles was farming, so you knew your dad as a farmer, and your dad learned farming from
His father.
His father. Okay, so it's good.
My father was one of the oldest children of the 14.
So now, was it the same farm that your grandfather was the one that your dad owned, or did it what?
Separate. My grandfather's farm was down on Triadelphia Road, which is called Pine Bottom Farm, next to the Franks. Ridgley. That was my uncle, my father's brother. And then my father bought this property across the river from here, from his uncle, during the Depression, the Great Depression of '33.
And do you remember how much?
$3,000.
How much land?
143 acres.
Okay. That's about $100 too high, but I'm not going to discuss that. So Ted, this is interesting now. Was this land recommended to your dad from your grandfather, or how did it come about?
Probably because of his uncle, probably, that owned it previously. And I would imagine that was the connection. And of course, Daddy being one of the oldest children, I mean, he had to move along too, you know.
Was it a general farm?
It was, yeah. We had everything.
No, I mean when your dad bought it. It was...
I think yes, everything was there. It had my. It had all the old outbuildings. Had an ice house. Had a smoke house when they do their butchering. Had the small barn. Had a barn for the cattle. Had a sheep barn. Had a chicken house. Everything that you need a building for animals.
Well, let's talk about the ice house.
I'm glad you asked me about that ice house because, you know, when I was a kid, I wasn't big enough to do it, but one of my father's brothers, his name was Andrew, same as mine, and that's why my nickname is Ted, and I was named after him. But we're talking about this global warming. And we're talking about the ice house. Now, this ice house was about 12 feet square, lined with logs around it. On the farm, they also had an ice pond that still exists, which would have been about 3 feet deep, just to hold the water. And I remember my father and uncle going down this river, dividing the two properties right here, cutting ice for the ice house. That ice would be 18 inches thick. I mean, you can't go out to any place except unless you went to an ice house. We can't get a block of ice at an ice house anymore. You get the cubes. And they'd cut that ice, haul it up, and put it in the ice house, which would have been about 10 or 12 feet deep, lined. And then they put the ice in layers and put straw over it. And I can remember we still had ice in August.
Now you call this an ice house. It wasn't in the ground.
Yes, it's in the ground. It's in the ground.
But you call that a house.
That's what we call it, ice house. I had a little cubicle over it and a door to go in and put the stuff in. Yeah.
How was the ice cut from the stream or the...
They had to saw it. They would have had to saw it. And I remember down on the river for sure that they would cut it in blocks. And I imagine they were sawing it. They weren't chopping it. And then they would have a long pole with tongs on the end. And when they'd cut it off, it would float down the river, get to the shallow part where it would stop. Then they'd go pull it in, put it in the wagon, take it up to the farm.
Or drag it up on a drag.
One of the two. They probably had a wagon to put it on. One of the two. I'm not sure whether that still exists on the farm presently or not. I've been there several years ago. The people that owned it, the Kittlemans, were very kind, showed me through the house, and I think they thought I attended a funeral for Harry Ayers, which was my neighbor at that time. Had the Ayers bus service. I used to babysit for them, and she was so kind. She probably thought I was from the church. I was dressed up, and after I introduced her to myself and told her what what I'd like to do, and she was very obliging, very wonderful, showed me through the house. As a matter of fact, I called her last night because I wanted to let them know that I was going to be here, and I wanted to express how much I appreciate her son Alan is doing. And I told her I had a picture, and I have the picture with me, of when I'm a little 6-year-old boy with my little Easter outfit with my short pants in front of their house.
We'll look at the pictures separately.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can I go back a second?
Go ahead.
To the butcher house?
Yes, butcher house.
You said butcher and smoke.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, every year they'd butcher their hogs, you know. And there was another shed where they could do their butchering, do all the, make their pudding and scrapple and do the bacon and the hams. And the reason why it's called a smokehouse, they would smoke their hams and their bacon. So they would cut hickory trees for hickory smoke. Yes, I remember all that stuff. I was a small youngster, but
What age do you think you were?
at that time, well, I was born and raised at that farm, so
Oh, okay.
probably 5 or 6. Yeah.
Let me see if I understand. You actually killed the animals outside and hung them.
Yes.
But then when you processed them and cut them up, you went into this building.
Yes.
That was called the butcher house. And then further processing was the smoking in the
Yes.
smokehouse.
10-4.
Same place.
Same place.
So you actually saw this when you were little.
Yes, sir.
Who was doing it?
Well, I got to tell you, it wasn't my father, because my father was chicken-hearted. He couldn't even kill a chicken. I remember my uncle took me rabbit hunting with him one day. It was on the farm, and Daddy was with me, and we saw this rabbit setting, and that Daddy shoot the rabbit. We couldn't even get my father to shoot the rabbit. No, somebody else did the slaughtering, but he'd help cut up. But
So your father, it sounds like your father might have loved animals. Is that what you're trying to say here? Or?
yes, my father was. Yes, he did.
You noticed that? How?
He never let us mistreat them. As a matter of fact, we had the horses, and when I got big enough to ride, I liked to ride old work horses. Couldn't fall off a work horse hardly. And my father would say, "Don't ride those horses on Sunday. They've been working all week. Let them rest."
What animals did you eat on the farm?
Pardon me?
What animals did you eat on the farm?
Chickens, turkeys, and pigs. We never slaughtered any beef.
Because
We didn't have any. We just had some dairy animals for the milk.
good. So, can you think back and tell me what you remember when the youngest, when you started actually helping on the farm?
Well, if you remember, Frank Sinatra said he did it his way. Remember his pretty song, Frank Sinatra? I did it his way.
I know it well.
Well, we did it the hard way.
Describe more.
Describe more. You can see this a hay rake right out, horse-drawn hay rake right outside the door here. I can remember driving the horses and the old dump rake, and did all that work by hand, and I was too young to do that. The biggest thing, well, I did cultivate corn with the horses. We got a horse cultivator right out the lane here at the museum. The biggest thing, of course, my uncle did the thrashing with his old thrash machines. We'd come in the farm. Our farm was a mile off the road. That's where I had to walk to meet the school bus. And it was Ivory Road, if you have any idea where Ivory Road is. Ivory Road is on this side of Gwinnell. Used to be a Ivory post office when I was a kid. I remember that. And I did all this. I could work the horses, but the biggest thing to help with, I really wasn't big enough at the time to help much with the threshing. I would help gather up the bundles of wheat and put them in shocks. But the hardest part was, was trying to cut corn and put it in the fodder shock. I was a little guy, I could hardly hold it in my arm, to put it in a fodder shock. So.
Well, they were tough to cut too, with a corn cutter.
They were, yes, they did.
Took all your strength just to whack each one.
So we did it the hard way.
Now, did your dad resist getting new equipment? Or did he like to hang on to what he had and just modify it?
I can't remember the year that he got his first tractor. I can tell you this, I have brought a lamp, a kerosene lamp. Our home never had running water, did not have electricity, had a wood cooking stove and a wood heating stove. It's amazing to me that our present population have never had to experience, and I never regretted it. I lived. I'm age 83. Didn't hurt me too bad. Walked a mile to get on the school bus. But I was tickled to death to have a sled in with a red wagon, My heavens. Not today anymore. But
Let's go back to when you were little.
yeah, I'm still growing.
And your brother helped, what do you have, a brother or sister?
No, two brothers. One brother 5 years older and one 10 years younger.
So this is the farm team. Was there other farm hands besides the three of you?
Well, earlier, Ruth, my father had his his brother Andrew helping. But I can't. He was a wonderful person. He'd make little boats for me and all that, and he's very crafty. And all those kids had to be crafty back in those days, But he didn't know. He was only there for a short time. And then Daddy did use the prisoners, the German prisoners, on the farm at harvest time.
You have a bunch of questions.
And they were nice people. They were nice people, the German prisoners.
How many did you have normally?
I guess maybe 8 or 10, maybe.
Do you know where they came from?
Howard County, Ellicott City.
At the freezer locker?
Yes.
And they were where before they came to the freezer locker?
I'm not exactly sure.
Fort Meade.
Fort Meade? Okay. All right.
Did you get to know any of them when you were little?
Well, I would talk to them. They were very, very kind to me.
Were you scared of them?
No, I was too young to be scared.
Okay. Or too brave?
Now, when they came to your farm, did they have even one guard rifle?
No.
Interesting.
No.
Would somebody supervise them or, keep track of the group?
Oh,
Or was it
I guess they had a supervisor, but they didn't have any guns, though. They had to have a supervisor.
Did any of them speak English?
I think so.
I mean, how did you?
I think, because I remember he trying to talk to me. I was a tiny little fella.
And dinner time at noon, did your mother, anybody feed them?
No. They had their own lunch.
And they were a big help?
Oh, yes. They were nice people. They were prisoners, but he was only trying to do what Hitler wanted them to do. I'm a Methodist, and we have a German, one of our congregation members is a wonderful person. And he served in Hitler's army, got captured, survived, and he also served in our service here in the United States later in his life. But yeah, he can throw out the German at you if you can understand it.
Now, you said you lived a mile back off the road, but did you have any local friends that you could play with? Or
Well, yes, at the heirs by service, they were our neighbors yet. And they had, they would have some foster children. They had a family of 4. And one of the youngest ones was my same age, a young man. We thought we was Huckleberry, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. You know, we'd go have a little camp out in the woods and try to smoke a corncob pipe.
Who did you feel was the more affluent family, yours or them?
All of them.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And why was that? Did they have
Well, they were shipping milk. My father was not shipping milk. You know, my father was just a general farmer and raising hogs for the market, raising sheep. I can remember shearing those sheep and didn't have electricity. What it was an old sheep shearer, and it had a crank on it. One person had to crank it to work the blades, and we did things the hard way. And as a matter of fact, that shearer is here someplace in the farm museum. I gave it to Johnny Frank several.
It's in the museum.
Okay.
Thank you.
So who taught you how to use that?
I didn't use it. I watched them do it.
Oh, okay.
I was too small. My uncle.
Let's talk about the first tools that you started using.
First tool was the corn cutter. Sure.
Who taught you that? The corn cutter. Who taught that to you, how to use it?
My father.
Okay.
Did you ever cut your leg off doing that?
No.
It was easy to do.
I understand.
Oh. So there was a lot of sharp stuff on it.
Oh, it's a sharp blade to cut.
So what's the next thing you were trained to use?
Ah, my, don't ask me what the next thing was trained to use.
I won't ask you. How about the horses on the farm? Did you get a chance to work with the horses?
Oh, yes. So rake hay with them, rake hay. And then we'd use one horse to, when we would get the hay on the wagons out in the field by hand with a fork. We didn't even have a hay unloader. You got a hay unloader here, I guess, later in life. Daddy got a hay loader. But that ought to be, had to put in a bunch and then take a fork out and put it on a wagon. And you take the wagon to the barn and you had your hay forks, which some of ours is here also. And then you'd have a horse hooked to the long rope, have a person go up on the wagon and put in the hay forks down into the hay, clamp it. Then the horse would pull the rope up into the hay mow and have a track up there to dump it. Well, they let me ride the horse to pull the hay up into the barn.
Did you ever have anything bigger than a dump rake? Did you ever have a side delivery rake?
No.
What did you mow with?
Had an old horse-drawn mower.
Sickle bar? Well, that was old-timey. That's the way we did it.
I told you, we did it the hard way.
And so the side delivery rake made a windrow, and then you made the piles, and then with a pitchfork, you put it up on the wagon, took it to the barn, and you were lucky enough to have a track to get it up into the barn and trip it and dump it.
Yes.
And you used a horse to
Pull it.
pull the hay up.
Because it didn't have a tractor at that time.
That track. A tractor would have been handy.
When you were actually little and living without electricity. So what was that like? How did you operate, especially at night, for instance?
Well, you asked that question, and it's really funny. My best explanation is if you don't know the difference, you enjoy what you have. Let there be light.
Now, for your your lanterns, you needed fuel. Where'd you get that from?
I guess Daddy would get it down at the grocery store from Uncle Albert.
You don't remember if it was kerosene or coal oil?
Kerosene.
And what did you use in the kitchen as a stove?
We had a wood stove. And of course, the old wood stoves back then, they had a compartment where you could heat your water as well. I don't know, maybe 5 gallons of water, maybe. But that was heated with wood.
So you never got a gas stove that used
No.
propane or whatever that
No,
stuff was?
not then. And we didn't have, and my father didn't have any chainsaws. It was all done with a crosscut saw to cut his wood for the house too.
Now, what did you use for a bathroom?
That's interesting too. To wash, we used a wash tub. And for the bathroom, we used to always go out to the two-holer outside. Had one of my, this is a joke for the day, had one of my city cousins come out and had to go to the bathroom with a two-holer and he put one foot in each hole and wet in his pants.
You can't be kidding.
I am.
But did you have a Sears Roebuck catalog?
Let me tell you something, we didn't even have a newspaper.
What'd you use for toilet paper?
You ever heard of corn cobs?
You got to soften them first, hopefully. And they were also softer one direction than they were the other.
That's great, really. So here you are growing up, and your farm it's a variety farm in terms of general farming. So sometimes you were doing, I want to try to figure out what your family was selling from the farm to make money.
They apparently had during the Depression, he would sell his hogs, of course, but they had what they called a market wagon. And they would take their produce and take it to Baltimore. And like I say, I can remember some of my father's ledgers. During the Depression, they sold eggs for 7 cents a dozen. And also, they had a nice orchard on the property, and they would sell their apples to Renahan Apple Factory over here at Sykesville in Howard County.
Did you travel much when that was all being delivered? Did you travel at all?
No. I guess I was too small, I suppose.
Uh-huh. So, give me a sense of how long, did you completely grow up on the farm?
No. We were poor people, and I really wasn't satisfied with. Daddy wasn't able to give me much money, and I guess when I was 13, 14, I started working away from the farm. I rode the combine to harvest the grain, put them into burro bags, and my gosh, we put 3 or 4 bags on the combine and get to a dumping station where we dump them, so farmers wouldn't have to run over the field. And good heavens, the barley was okay, but when we got to do the wheat, that was so much heavier, and man, I could hardly maneuver them bags on there. That's I'm 13, I guess. And then I used to do a little babysitting for the Ayerses. They had the 2 boys now that own the Ayers bus service. I used to babysit for them. And they were wonderful people to me. That was the Hill family. She was, Mary Catherine was a Hill. She was still living, almost late 90s right now. Anyway, I used to help the Hills with the show cattle, with the Ayrshire cattle. And man, I thought that was the greatest thing, was showing those cattle, purebred cows.
Where?
And they were at Daisy. That's where their farm was.
No, where were they showing them?
Every place. I remember going to New Jersey with them. And nowadays, when these people, heard people go to these shows, they'll be staying at the motels. But our motel was, we'd shake up straw and put a cow blanket down on it and spend the night, and then the next day use the straw for bedding with the cows. But that really enticed me. And the oldest hill was Buddy Hill, and he wound up managing a show place in Reisterstown. It was called Logwood Farms. It was a show place, and they had registered Holstein cattle. And I have some pictures I'll show you later of they were bought. The person that owned the farm was H.B. Millhauser, and where the farm is presently is where the Franklin High School presently exists. But it was a show place. Showed cattle all over the country, these Holstein cows all over the country. We even took them in boxcars to Chicago, Illinois. I loved that. Loved it.
What ages were you then?
I'm my late teens, okay. And I finished my high school. I went to West Friendship High School, elementary school, and then went to Lisbon High School.
Well, you were a mile back off the road. Tell us about your school days from beginning to end, the progression of your schooling.
Well, I'll tell you, my parents, I really didn't want to get this personal, but I'm going to get personal because it's very important. When I was 6 years old, my mother had some mental issues. And back in those days, they weren't treated as they are treated today. They were treated almost like criminals. It's a shame. So, my father never pushed me to do well in school. My brother, the teachers always, why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be like your brother? Because he was a better student than I. And like I say, we didn't have a newspaper or nothing, But life was good. Had a red wagon and a sled.
What were all the schools you went to?
So I went to Franklin my last year in high school and worked on the farm and with the cattle. I wound up milking those cows 3 times a day at one time in my lifetime. And they let me play, the deal was, I played basketball in high school, halfway decent. And played basketball for Reisterstown with the big time guys. And
what was your elementary school?
Elementary was West Friendship until the 8th grade, and then we went to Lisbon. And after I had the misfortune of working on the farm with farm accidents, with losing the sight of my right eye, that enticed me to go to college on trial. I had about as much preparation to go to college as a billy goat, but I had an opportunity, thank the Lord. And I had to start on trial, but also when I wound up being in the University of Maryland Alpha Zeta, the honorary agriculture fraternity. So that's my education, and I was the first one in our family that I know of that attended college. But with the Lord's guidance, and that's where I met my wife, working in the dining hall at the University of Maryland. And she graduated when I was in there because I didn't go to college until after I'd lost my eye 4 years later. So she was a senior and I was a freshman.
You were gonna tell us how you lost your eye.
Driving a 20 penny spike, 20 penny nail in a bullpen fence. A bullpen fence.
How old were you?
19, I was 20. Now, I'll get to the rest of my story about where I've been in my lifetime. My life has been spent in the dairy industry.
Let's go back
Go ahead.
and tell us where you met your wife and what ages you were.
Well, I was, I was 24, she was 23, and met working in the dining hall at the University of Maryland, working their way through college. And that's the other thing. These younger generation think they can't go to college because they can't afford it. But if they want to work, they can afford it. But underline the word work, parentheses.
When you left the farm to go to college, tell me what skills you knew how to use on the farm.
All I knew was hard work, a pitchfork, pitchfork, and then later how to drive a tractor.
Okay.
And pick up the hay bales, you know. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite piece of equipment then? That you said, I'm so glad I really love working with this?
Not really. I like the cows.
Okay. I won't consider them equipment then. What happened to the cows when they were old?
Well, the one I got a picture of, the one that's Reserve All-American several times, she was buried at the farm at Reisterstown. And I guess if those cows don't mean much to you, they go to the rendering plants, just like any other dead animal. But if they have meaning for you in your life, they're going to be buried someplace on your property.
None of them were for meat?
No, these were all for milk. As a matter of fact, we had the highest producing herd in Maryland with the Holsteins. It was a show place, had show cattle, registered Holsteins.
What equipment did you use in the milking process?
Well, that was all done with your machines, milk machines. We had to, at that time, we had to put our milk in the 10-gallon milk cans like you have here, and pick them up and put them in a water cooler to cool the milk. That's chest high, and that's where I developed my muscles. I didn't have to go to the gym. And we sold our milk in the 10-gallon cans. Had to haul it down to Kuntz Creamery, outside of on 140.
How many head did you have, roughly?
They had roughly 65 to 70 head.
Okay.
2 bulls. Back then they bred artificial breeding wasn't, the bulls didn't run loose, they were hand bred. The cow would need to be bred, we'd take her to the bull, and that's where that happened, where the bullpen fence was knocked down, and I had to try to put it back up, and was in a hurry, and didn't have the nail started good enough when it started to slam it hard, and so. But sometimes
How was that taken care of? How was somebody on the farm do first aid, or just how we?
Well, it's happened to be that the manager of the farm was playing baseball here in Howard County, and he asked if I would do the milking that Sunday, and I said, yes, I'll do the milking. And I was there by myself. I'd finished milking and went down and checked the cattle and everything, and I saw the bull was out. And
But
yeah.
it happened to you.
And then I didn't. That was on a Sunday, and I didn't get to the Baltimore eye, ear, and throat until Monday, and they tried to save the sight of my eye. I laid in the hospital bed for 2 weeks on my back with my eyes covered up, and because they had to put some sutures right in my eye, and the nail really didn't hurt me. It happened so fast, but what really hurt was when I got there Monday, and they had to numb my eye, and with that needle, they didn't like me. They didn't like me very well because I got sick in an instant, if you can well imagine.
Well, somebody immediately dressed your eye. Somebody immediately, was it bleeding? I'm trying to.
No blood. It was just weeping fluids.
I got you. So you wound up putting something on your eye on the farm right after it happened yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I did go to the doctor, but that's all he did. You know, he said you got to go to Baltimore Eye, Ear, and Throat. So that's.
So this was not the farm that your father and your mother and you lived on. We're talking about a different farm.
Different farm.
This is when you started going out getting money and income. Did dad ever develop I guess I'll say remuneration system with you when you were young? Meaning, did you get an allowance, or did he actually pay you to work on the farm?
No, I never got an allowance. The only time I ever got it, if I asked him for money, if he had any, he would give me a couple coins or something. Buy an ice cream cone, maybe.
Good.
We did it the hard way.
That's the title of your story. We did it the hard way.
Yes, sir.
The Daisy store had ice cream too.
Ebert's ice cream it was, some of the best.
What was your favorite flavor?
Vanilla was always going to me too. And I can remember, I still have it. I remember that we had the white ice cream maker. Remember the ice cream maker? And I have the top, and I have the bottom, and the paddles. But darn it, through all these, there are the fox hunters out there, so that have to hold the handle. But I still have that.
Yeah, you needed salt and you needed ice.
Yes. Yep.
Someone to churn it.
Yeah, we made that homemade ice cream, man.
You put in your own strawberries, your own raspberries.
That's just have the ice cream.
Did you have any fruits, vegetables? What kind of garden did you have?
We had a garden with everything.
Who did most of the harvesting in the garden?
My mother.
What else did your mom do to help on the farm?
My mother was a nurse, and before she was married. And as I say, when I was about 6, my mother had her big-time mental breakdown. And God bless my father. He did the best he could to raise us children. But she was committed to the hospital, Spring Grove. And as I say, they treated him like criminals, not like a sick person. And then after that, it was she still did the housework, but that was basically it.
So before this happened, like when you were 5 or 4 or whatever, can you tell me what you remember about what your Sundays were like?
We go to church.
Okay.
We go to church.
Where was that?
At the Gwinnell United Methodist Church.
Okay.
And Mother would drive. They had the old 1928 Chevy. She'd drive. But after her illness, she never drove again. But
And what
yeah.
would you do after church?
We'd probably come home and play with my, maybe ride the horses or whatever.
Did you go to visit friends?
Only time we visited friends was, God bless them, we had a strong family. My grandmother and grandfather, even though they had 14 kids, they would always have Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner together. The whole family. And grandmother Of course, you had to be very strict with 14 of them running around there. I can't imagine having 14 of them have a dinner bell. And but I can remember if you had to have something, everything was on the table. And you also had to clean your plate.
Or
You better clean your plate.
What was your typical Sunday dinner?
I can't really remember the typical Sunday dinner. You mean at
Roast beef, fried
oh, you mean for at the Thanksgiving and Christmas?
No, typical Sunday after you came home from church.
Mostly vegetables. I know. My father couldn't afford much meat at the store. I was tickled to death if I had a hot dog, man. I thought I was having a heyday. So it'd be mostly vegetables. And back to my grandmother, she had these stewed tomatoes. I'll never forget it. Never forget this. I've never liked stewed tomatoes ever since. You had to have something off. Everything on the table. Clean the plate. And I guess I was so, I don't know, anyway, the stewed tomatoes made me sick.
Did you have any pets on the farm?
I had some rabbits.
I mean, dogs or cats?
All we had, you also had a dog.
A dog?
Yes. Collie, very faithful.
Several cats?
Or I had to have some cats at the barn.
Well, so Ted, when you were little, and you were, since you had a general farm, were you able to, was the family able to grow their own food, or did you have to go somewhere else? And if you did go somewhere else, where did you go to get them?
No, they raised most of this. Well, they'd have to buy bread, of course. Well, mother would make bread too. Mother would make bread.
So when you were growing up, your grandmother and your grandfather were still living when you were little?
Yes.
And where were they living?
Triadelphia. My grandparents?
Mm-hmm.
Triadelphia. And
So they would come over often, or?
no, we'd always go there. I can never remember my grandparents coming to our house. We'd always go to their house.
When you, I know this is gonna, you seem like you're a pretty open guy, so when you have, here it is late at night, and you're now 7 or 8 or 9 years old, and you gotta go to the bathroom, and there's no electricity, how does that happen? What is the process?
You'd have a pot. You wouldn't go outside in the dark, in the cold. You'd go in the pot, and then you empty a pot in the morning and take it down to the resort.
And who emptied it?
Mother.
So, back to the you're late.
And how did you clean the pot?
With water.
What kind of water?
Soap and water, yeah.
Steam water was on that wood-burning stove. Sterilized it, didn't it?
Yeah, but we used to take our bath, we had a wash tub, big wash tub.
I don't know if you call it a pot-belly stove, but the heating stove was located where?
In our living room. Because the kitchen stove had been in the kitchen, of course.
Right. And then the heat would get upstairs how?
How?
Did you have heat upstairs?
No.
And that was where the bedrooms were? So you slept pretty cold in the winter, didn't you?
Well, we had nice blankets.
Okay. And so that was...
When these hunters go hunting now, when they go out hunting, go camping, half of them don't have a lot of them just in tents, so how are they keeping warm?
Now we got down bedding and stuff and sleeping bags.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those old feather tick blankets were pretty daggone nice, too. Remember the feather tick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Did you ever help Mom in the kitchen?
most likely.
You can't remember the kind of...
No,
things you did in the
no,
kitchen?
no.
Okay.
As many children as were there, what's the most you remember being in one bed at the same time, sleeping?
I was never there. Well, only time I ever slept at grandmother's was she'd make, if I was down there, she'd make me take a nap in the afternoon. So I was never there at nighttime with my grandparents.
How long was that trip? It took you how long to get down to?
Well, we wound up having a 1933 Chevrolet car. We had a Model T before that, but we wound up with a 1933 Chevy car.
Now this was separate from the farm equipment.
Yes.
So was there a farm, when did the first farm truck arrive?
My heavens. I was probably a junior in high school, probably.
So are you saying all those years before the truck arrived? Oh, no, you would have gotten other farm equipment, right?
Wagons and horses.
Wagons and horses.
So it was mostly the horses before the truck arrived?
Oh, of course.
So if you wanted to go over to your grandparents, you rigged up the horses? And
No. We went in the car, 33.
But how did, okay, so I want to picture at those times that you only have the horses and the wagons, and now you're traveling. Where did you travel? Did you travel to your grandparents, or did you just travel to the closest store? Or tell me about that.
Well, it wasn't very far to travel to get to the closest store, because we was on Ivory Road, and the closest store was West Friendship. And the only other...
About a mile just to get to the
Get the road.
That's exactly right. And
And how far was it from your entrance to your farm to the store?
well, what 3 miles?
Little.
Only other thing we did, we go to Sykesville get my hair cut
How did you get there?
in a 1933 Chevy.
How did you get there before you got to Chevy?
Probably an old Model T, probably. And they may have been even cutting my hair. I don't go to the barber shop to this day. I haven't been to a barber shop for 50 years. Yeah, I've been married 58 years, and my wife cuts my hair.
And we have electric tools today.
Yeah.
My mother used hand clippers.
Yeah, that's what my mother did too, most likely.
So,
We didn't travel any place. We didn't travel.
okay, so then when your dad made his deliveries, he started making them with horse and buggy?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a bit about, I'm kind of trying to picture the time where...
I can't tell you much about it.
No, but listen
Yeah.
to the question first. I was trying to picture with you the time where your dad, and even maybe his father, said, you know, they got these motor-driven vehicles out there, and, you know, maybe we start thinking about them, and because they might be a lot easier for us to do what we're doing. Do you remember how that transition took place?
Well, that's when my father got his truck.
So one day you just looked outside and said, oh, there's a truck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically.
This was before you had a tractor.
Yes. About the same period.
That had to cost a few pennies, didn't it?
Yes, but as I said, my father wasn't a big-time large operator. He had a lot of things, but we didn't have money. Had our health.
And that's priceless.
You planted corn, right?
Oh, yes.
And how did you do that, and with what?
What the old corn planter I got here, it had the check rows. I don't want to talk about the check rows. That was where they would have a wire and it would trip to plant the corn. You've got one out here. And then back in, it didn't have any chemicals for weed control and that stuff. It had to be done with cultivator, with a horse-drawn cultivator. And then you could go any which way across. It was just like a checkerboard. And that's why they called it a check planter, I guess. But you could go back and forth. You go long ways.
Okay, you used the horses to pull a plow.
One row plow.
And, okay, walk behind, they walk.
Ride it. We ride the plow.
And what other implements did you use to soften up the soil?
Well, it had the old horse-drawn plow.
You had well, how about the disc harrows and the drags?
Had the drags. No, had no disc harrow. I had a spring tooth harrow. Yeah. Yeah.
Didn't have a disc harrow?
No, didn't have a disc harrow.
That would cut it up pretty good.
Yes, yes. But not many farmers had disc harrows back then.
The spring tooth and the
Yeah.
drag. And,
Yeah.
And a drill?
Drill.
Tell us about the drill.
Well, that's how they had to plant their wheat, and at the same time you could be planting your clover with it. There's a hayseed with when you're planting your wheat or your barley with the drill, and that'd be drawn by two horses.
Did you walk behind it?
My father, I never planted.
But you saw him doing it.
I could drag with the horses, pick up stones.
Did you walk behind the drag or did you stand?
I've stayed on the drag.
Stand on it?
Yeah.
You know, you're old enough to remember when the horses had the blinders on the front. What were the blinders for?
I guess the reason being, I guess, so they wouldn't be frightened by what they're pulling. Then also when you was cultivating corn with the horses, how would you stop the horses from eating the corn? They put a wire muzzle over so they couldn't eat on the horses, so they couldn't eat the corn as they going down the road.
I got one at my house.
What, the muzzle?
Yeah,
Okay.
You know, principally it was because the horse has its eyes on the side of its head, and it can see all the way around. And it can see things behind them, or mostly behind them. And so you blind them so they can only see. Fish are the same way. They have fish on the side of it.
Electricity came along, Ted, and was there a talk about that, or do you know any of the experiences of getting electricity?
I just remembered when it did happen.
And you found that you could do what?
Turn on the switches, that's all. I wanted to be a carpenter.
How about a radio?
Yeah, I got an old radio too.
And that used electricity. What kind of radio did you have?
I don't know, we still got one up there.
Probably in that order, Kent.
Did you get into the radio? Meaning, did you like listening to it?
Yeah, I used to like to listen to and Abner and that kind of stuff. We listened to that radio, just so you know, that was after dark when that would come on. And Abner. Yeah, that's the only basic one I remember that one. Oh, the Lone Ranger, Giddy Up the Lone Ranger, Tonto and the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, you don't want to forget him.
You know, at that time, Amos and Andy was so
Yeah, Amos and Andy,
they
yeah.
were so popular that the movie theaters, they would shut down the movie and broadcast from the radio into the movie house because people wouldn't go to the movies if they had to miss Amos and Andy. That's how popular. Because it was only 15 minutes long.
So, in the logics of that, progressing forward, then there was this box that had a moving picture in it. Do you remember much about how that came about?
No, but I remember my mother, gosh, they had some nice stuff. My mother had the old Victrola. And one of my wife's relatives got my Victrola away from me. Made me angry. But I can remember playing that. Had all them records. I remember my mother had an organ. I can still remember her, back in the power over here. And I can still remember playing on that organ, the old rugged cross. But I'd like to have been a good woodworker, but darn it, the only wood that my father had around there was oak stuff. And can you imagine a little kid trying to make something out of oak? No, that was a failure, bro. It was a failure.
Yeah, you did little with it.
No.
You know what Ridgley is? Like a pen,
That's where you do the little ducks and everything.
Yeah,
Carving.
Yeah,
Carving.
yeah, Whittle.
we call it Ridgley.
Yeah. So you had somebody was training you to be a carpenter, or you?
No. It's just a younger desire, you know.
Oh, I got you.
Never developed, and Daddy never pushed me to do it.
Okay.
Daddy wasn't a carpenter. I remember when he got his first tractor, man, at the end of the day, he'd go down and wipe that thing off like he was going to a show. So, I thought it was taking too much time with the tractor.
Did you ever have any exotic tools like a jigsaw or anything like that?
Had jigsaws, yeah.
And a drill? What else was in your carpentry?
Daddy had most everything.
So he was a pretty good carpenter.
Daddy could do most things. He wasn't a builder, though. Daddy wasn't a builder.
So before he passed away, did he ask you and your brother to keep the farm going?
No. Daddy sold the farm when I was at Logwood, late teens. Then he worked off the farm.
What did he do?
He worked at the lumber yards and worked at the fish and game over at Sykesville. His brother-in-law used to manage that.
And when you finished college, what did you start to do then?
Well, it's very interesting. I got my degree in animal science and was hired by the university and started as a herdsman at the University of Maryland Agronomy and Dairy Research Farm down in the Valley Quarters for 2 years. And then I had served 3 years as the manager there at the Agronomy and Dairy Research Farm.
Well, that area back, Valley Quarter Road has changed.
Every place. I'm coming down here this morning to all these board fences and horses.
So then what did you do in your life after the Valley Quarter?
I'm going to tell you some very interesting material now. And I've been involved in the dairy industry all of my life. And as I say, I love showing the cattle. And I had quite an opportunity to work with some wonderful cattle. And then this gentleman from Kingwood, West Virginia, had a dairy heifer replacement operation. Kingwood, West Virginia is about 20 miles from Morgantown, West Virginia, to give you perspective. And I went there on a 5-year contract, worked my buns off. Wound up milking 200 cows, put in that area for 200 cows. But I was there on a 5-year contract.
200 cows a day?
Yes.
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Anyway, I honored my contract, stayed there for 5 years. I bought a small farm up there, 62 acres. I wished I'd have kept it. And moved my mother and father up there with me. And like I say, I was there 5 years. And I enjoyed the community, a nice community. Had a hospital right there where we lived what was called the West Virginia Poorhouse. You ever heard of such a thing? Well, that's where it was. There were 28 rooms. They had one section, 6 rooms separated for the manager of the poorhouse, and that's where we lived. And so then I'll get to an interesting point. After my 5 years up, I was a high school classmate from Lisbon High School by the name of Fred Harner. came and visited with me in Kingwood and wanted to hire me. And he had training with the collecting and processing bull semen at the University of Maryland when the Maryland Artificial Breeders Co-op was at the University of Maryland. And when I worked also part-time there as well as working in the dining hall, help with the bulls. So his business, my house classmate, his business, he went business for himself, and that was going from farm to farm. Whoever had a bull they wanted to have semen processed on and frozen, he would do that. So I did that for 11 years with him. You won't interview too many people that's had that experience. I don't care how many you're going to interview. I guarantee you won't have very many people that's had that experience. And he had a small plane. We'd travel from the Carolinas to New York, Poughkeepsie, New York. Y plantation, big time, beef cattle. A lot of work for the dairy industry, dairy bulls. But that's what did that for 11 years. And then showed up at my last employment, was hired as a director of sales and service for the Maryland Artificial Breeders, what turned out to be Sire Power and Hour. Was located up at on 15 outside of Frederick. And I was hired to be the director of sales and service for Maryland and West Virginia, in charge of the professional technicians, which Dave Patrick is one, here in Harrod County. And God bless him. And yeah, that was very, very interesting. And we have a lot of foreign visitors to come here to see daughters of our bulls we had in service. And I think one year, I think I had 30 tours. They'd ask me to tour Maryland, take the people, pick them up at the airport, whatnot, and take them to the farms to see the cattle of our bulls. And they also, Sire Power, one year, don't ask me why, but they sent me over to England, France, and Germany for being an ambassador to visit with those people in the dairy industry. And a lot of them were people that had come here that I'd given tours to in Maryland. So, yeah, that's it. And you got the whole story now, I think. And
So Ted, could you, for me, compare farming in the early days to farming today? What is your...
Very easily I can compare that. I brought some notes with me. And where we live now, we live at New Windsor, Maryland. And we've been there over 30-some years. And my wife is a fourth generation there. And I have all the old buildings on that property, just like my father, when I was a little boy, across the river. All those buildings are still standing. And so anyway, we had to borrow money for one reason or another, and we lived through Farm Credit, Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit in Frederick. And they sent me out this thing. Their annual banquet's coming up here very shortly, and I brought this with me, and it's going to answer some of the questions you're talking about. And 100 years ago, when it was their Farm Credit's celebrating their 100th year, it was established in 1916. And it was born with the Federal Farm Land Act. And they provided these little tidbits. One was the price of a bushel of wheat back 100 years ago was $1.43, compared to today at $5.28. You get this one. 100 years ago, 31% of our United States population was involved with farming. Today, it's less than 1%. How can this majority of people have a great appreciation for what's here at this Heritage Museum? They haven't been there, they haven't done that. Half of them don't even know what the instruments are in these buildings around here. More than half. Only the ones that have the farm background. Dozen eggs, 100 years ago, was 20 cents a dozen. $2.75 a day, or more. Average cost of a baseball game, 25 cents compared to $29. Cost of a loaf of bread, 4 cents compared to $2.30. Average cost of a movie ticket, 7 cents, $9.50. Average cost for a gallon of milk, 36 cents. You ask me how agriculture has changed? I missed one thing though. Wait, I missed one thing here. This one's very interesting. We're talking about cutting corn, harvesting corn. Time needed to harvest 100 bushel of corn 100 years ago was 35 to 40 hours. Today, 1 to 5 minutes. How'd you like that little tidbit?
Shocking. Now, do you have your own personal opinion about how farming has changed?
I've expressed it a couple of times. We did it the hard way, they do it the easy way. Sit on air-conditioned vehicles to do the farm work. We did it the hard way, out in the beating sun.
You know, the machine that combine everything into one spot. You're talking about how many bushel it was in 1.5 minutes or something. The corn is here, and all of a sudden it's in the truck on its way. It wasn't that way in our time.
But you know what? Nobody got hurt. And it used to be with the old corn pickers and all of that. It wasn't uncommon at all to see somebody having their arms taken off with a corn picker and that kind of thing. And the ones I feel sorry for today, really in our society, is with danger-wise, is our law enforcement officers.
Anything else you want to add? I've run out of questions.
No, I do want to add something.
Please.
Thank you for allowing me to do it. And I am so happy that the Heritage Farm Museum has allowed for a permanent home for the Maryland Dairy Shrine. I hope I live long enough to see it come to fruition. You know, it was started, the Dairy Shrine was started, Maryland Dairy Shrine, in 1963. And where they was initiated, it was to be recognized influential people, whatever, in cattle, that had made contributions to the dairy industry in Maryland. And we have, it's a selection process, a nominating process of who is going to be, they make a nomination and you'll have a panel of anonymous judges to say which ones will be inducted. There, I have the list with me of the inductees. And interestingly, there's 11 Howard County inductees in the Maryland Dairy Shrine. namely Harvey Hill, Buddy Hill. A lot of their doctors from the University of Maryland was very influential. We had the Dunlogan Farm here at Ellicott City was so influential in the total dairy industry. And the manager of that was Paul B. Meisner. He was one of the inductees. And it started at the Maryland Artificial Breeders Co-op in Frederick. And I have a brochure I would like to leave with you. And I guess they thought the bull stud with the artificial breeders would be there for a lifetime. But as we're talking about here, things changed. That property has been sold. We haven't had a permanent home for the Maryland Dairy Shrine. I guess they thought it was going to be there forever. It was small. And it didn't cost anything because of the property right there with the office. And the Maryland Dairy Shrine has been living almost like gypsies since they sold the property. They had to take the portraits out of there, artifacts, that type of thing. I guess it wound up at the Maryland University of Maryland Agronomy Dairy Research Farm for a while. And now it's up at Hagerstown at the University of Maryland. And now, through the generosity for the Howard County people called Maple Lawn Farms, the Yeagers, are really the backbone of this establishing here. And with my cousin, Johnny Frank, who worked so diligently for this place, I hope I see their fruition. They're working on it, and it's to honor people and cattle with who have been influential in the dairy industry. And I was selected. You don't do it yourself; your peers do it, and I'm one of them.
Well, we're happy to say it's going to come to fruition. Won't let it down.
Thank you. Thank you.